Hi guys, so I am here today to film a video called reviewing the 10 highest rated books that I've read. So that is in terms of their average rating on Goodreads, when everybody gives them a rating out of 5 and then they get an average across the board, and what I thought of them, whether I fit in with the average reviewer, whether these are some of my favourite books or whether I completely disagree. A while ago, it was like a month ago or something, I filmed a video where I did this for the 10 lowest rated books that I'd read, and it was a complete mixed bag. There were books that I completely agreed with people on, there were books that I loved and was really surprised to see there. So I really enjoyed that video and thought it was interesting to compare, and then also just like highlight some books that maybe I'd forgotten to talk about as much as some of the other books that I talk about. Like I said, filmed the version of this for the lowest rated books on my TBR, and I've also seen Lauren do this, and now Emma over at Drinking by My Shelf has done it for her highest rated books. So it's something that's going on around booktube and I really enjoy watching, and I just wanted to like sort of jump in here and do the opposite version, I guess. In that last video I scrolled through my Goodreads according to highest average rating of what I've read and showed you that screenshot, which I'll do the same here because I think it's just interesting to see, and through that we'll find the 10 books that I'll then go on to tell you my thoughts on. But what I think is going to be interesting about this video is that there's probably going to be a lot of series up there. I think it's been the same for everyone. Harry Potter has really high average ratings, and I'm not going to sit here and review all 7 Harry Potter books because then this video just becomes about Harry Potter. So if any book is in a series, I will only review the first book that comes up and then skip past the rest. Side note, I am, as you can probably tell, in Edinburgh staying with my mum at the moment. However, I did pre-film some content before I came up here, and if you see me back in London in any videos in the next few weeks, then they are surely filmed in London, because I'm assuming I will be in Edinburgh for a little while given everything that is going on. So, to I'm sure many people's surprise, the first book is not Harry Potter, it's Hear the World Entire by Anne Hayward. I'm going to do the reviews after I've gone through and found the 10 books I'm going to talk about. So that would be the first one. We then have our first Harry Potter, which is The Half-Blood Prince, and I'd already seen this in Emma's video because it was the highest rated one for her as well, and it's an average, isn't it? So it's going to be the same for everybody. And we'll talk about whether I agree with that as well. Fritz Basket volume 23, I can't remember off the top of my head if that's the final one, but it's very, very late in the series. I'm sorry, I have to check, I'm just curious. This is a manga series that I obviously completed quite a few years ago. And there is precisely 23 volumes, so that is the last one in this series. And I think a lot of people have commented on this phenomenon, but it's very true that last books or later books in series tend to get higher ratings, assuming they don't go completely off course, because it means the people that are reading them have persevered and have been enjoying the series as a whole, rather than picking up book 1, not liking it, giving it a low rating and then continuing on. We then of course have more Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire, Prisoner of Azkaban, and then A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. I actually read A Storm of Swords, which is the third book in his Song of Ice and Fire series, in 2 parts, because you could buy them as 2 shorter books, and this is the second part called Blood and Gold, so it's also the last book I ever bothered to read in that series. We then have Dear Joella, or A Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Saga Volume 2, which is a comic book series. We then have more Fritz Basket, which is irrelevant. More Harry Potter again, Deathly Hallows. Why is the Deathly Hallows on here twice? Somehow I've managed to rate 2 editions of the Deathly Hallows. Never mind. The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the third and final book in the Lord of the Rings series. Saga Volume 3, again more Saga, that's obviously done very well for itself. Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith, which is a poetry collection. More Saga. Wondersmith, which is the sequel to Nevermore by Jessica Townsend, and lastly Asata, an autobiography by Asata Shakur, which brings us to 10 books in total. So let's talk more about those books. The first one was Hear the World Entire by Anne Hayward. I'm so pleased to see that this has a really high average rating, because I think it is a really phenomenal novella. This is a shorter work that retells the Greek myth, or Greek and Roman myth really, sorry, about Medusa. In the most popular versions of this ancient myth, Medusa was a mortal woman who was raped by the god Poseidon and then punished by the goddess Athena for having been raped in her temple and turned into a gorgon, this monstrous woman with snake for hair that turned men into stone by looking at them. And she has quite a recognisable look in popular culture and retellings and remakes when she crops up, but I haven't seen a lot of explorations in sort of accessible pop culture like Anne Wynn's book, where Medusa's like past is explored and her trauma is explored, and she is seen as a victim or a survivor of something terrible that happened. Instead, she often gets painted as a monster, and this is the only version of her story that I've read that really does that, that looks at those sides of the myth, and I thought it was incredible. It very much, like I said, explores those themes of trauma. And Medusa, after what happens to her, starts living in isolation because she fears turning people into stone, and it's sort of about her like receding into herself and what happened there. And it's incredible, like I mentioned, so I'm really pleased to see it's got a high average rating. I really enjoyed it and I thought it was like a really interesting musing on the myth. I actually interviewed Anne Wynn on my podcast, so if you're interested in hearing more from the author herself, I will link that down below. But then, like we mentioned, we have Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, which I am so surprised has the highest average rating. I'm not surprised in terms of the fact that it's later in the series, so I guess more people stick around, but so many people love Harry Potter that I would be surprised if that's their favourite. Whose favourite is the Half-Blood Prince? Tell me if that's your favourite, because it's my least favourite. Of all the books, it's the one I listen to the least, and I listen to the Harry Potter books multiple times every year. They're my comfort listen. I put them on in the background when I'm doing various different things. And I rarely pick the Half-Blood Prince. I don't know what it is. There's something about it I just don't love that much, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe do they spend much time outside of Hogwarts? Because I've always been a sucker for when they're outside Hogwarts, as much as I love Hogwarts, and maybe that makes me not like it so much. Maybe it's the fact that Snape's the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. I never loved that twist that much. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's the one I'm drawn to the least. My favourite is the Deathly Hallows. I listen to the Deathly Hallows so much more than I listen to any of the other ones on audiobook, and I think I'm correct in saying that the one with the lowest average rating, just while we're on the topic of Harry Potter, is Chamber of Secrets, and I think that is blasphemous. I think the Chamber of Secrets is incredible. I think it might be my second favourite. I don't know why people aren't as big a fan of the Chamber of Secrets as the rest of the books. I think the Chamber of Secrets sets up so many incredible, important, integral plot points for the rest of the series. I think it just does so much building on book one that then establishes for the rest of the books, and I love it. I love the kind of dark, creepy, mystery nature of the whole basilisk plotline, and yeah, I don't know why that one gets so much stick. But then we have Fritz Basket, volume 23, which is the final volume. I'll just talk more about the series in general because I think it's just another case of the last one gets the highest rating, but obviously quite a few have made it there. I don't know if there's any stats on this, but I assume Fritz Basket is one of the most widely read mangas in sort of like the Western world because it had quite a lot of popularity. There was a anime adaptation of it, and I think it just managed to kind of crack into the mainstream over here. It was very much my introduction to manga. I started reading them when I was in my early teens. I used to get them out of the library and I ended up buying the DVDs. I really enjoyed the story. The anime, when I watched it, only adapted the first few volumes. It never carried on with the series, but I did, and I overall really enjoyed the series. It's been a long time and I haven't read a lot of manga in the past few years, but this one I always remember incredibly fondly. I remember very much enjoying. I can totally see why it appeals to so many readers and it's had such a wide readership. And like I said, because it was an introduction for me, I've always recommended it to people who are looking to get into manga. It is sort of a blend of contemporary and fantasy, so it has a lot of contemporary elements. It's set in a high school. We have a young girl who ends up moving in with this family and all of their dynamics and relationships, but there's a curse on this family which means that they turn into animals from the Chinese zodiac when they are touched by members of the opposite sex. So like if they wanted to hug someone of the opposite sex, it would turn them into animals, and obviously that's very much affected their life and their relationships with other people. They kind of cut themselves off a little bit, and this girl's able to kind of open them up a little bit and sort of improve their lives in the same way that they're able to improve her life. And I really enjoy this series from what I remember. We then had A Storm of Swords Part 2, so I'll just talk generally about A Storm of Swords from A Song of Ice and Fire. I think Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire are fine. Like, I do not love them as much as some people do at all. I don't think they're some of the best fantasy out there, but I also think they're quite light on the fantasy. Do you know what I mean? They're not like super magical for me. They don't read like magical stories. They read like super intense historical fiction with some fantastical elements. And in saying that, they also have a lot of emphasis obviously on like the fighting and the sort of wars, which isn't really my thing. I think the world building's incredible. I persevered through books 1, 2 and 3, but I also struggled with how many perspectives there are because I literally did not care about so many characters. So when I was reading all 3 of those books, or 4 since I read book 3 in parts, I would be so bored reading some characters and just eagerly anticipating the return of other characters. And because of that, I would be like reading some parts of this book being like, oh, this is like 2 stars, I'm so disinterested, and other bits, other characters thinking, this is really good, this is 4 stars, I love this. And it felt like many different books in one, and therefore really hard to rate, and also just really hard to get invested in because I didn't care about everybody. For me, I need to kind of care about all the perspectives, or at least like 90% of them in a multiple perspective story for me to bother reading on. It's not worth slogging through 5 people I don't care about to get to one person I do for me. And you know, great if you love Game of Thrones, and I'm so glad so many people get joy from those books, but for me it was a push to get that far. Like, I was pushing myself to continue reading them, and there would always be moments in them I would enjoy, but I wasn't enjoying a lot of it, so I kind of gave up after book 3 and was just like, why am I wasting my time? I also don't think it deals with sexual violence very well and doesn't explore it very well, so that's, you know, what I have to say on that topic. We then have Dear Joella, or A Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a little non-fiction book. It's sort of a follow-on to We Should All Be Feminists by the same author. It has a little bit more complexities to it, so I think once you've got like that basic understanding that We Should All Be Feminists gives you of what feminism means, Dear Joella really gives you some sort of like practical observations of the world around us and how we live our lives and how we raise our children. And for that reason, I think it's actually kind of superior in a way to We Should All Be Feminists. Like, read We Should All Be Feminists. Love that in some countries they've started giving it out to kids in school because it's a great introduction if you've never heard of it before. But I think if you have any understanding of feminism, then Dear Joella will offer you a little bit more, and I loved it for that reason, and I'm so pleased to see it has such a high average rating. I hope it's getting into lots of people's hands and lots of people are reading it, because I think it's a really great jumping off point, and a really great sort of like basic expansion on the concept that will then sort of help you build up your sort of feminist activism and understanding of misogyny and patriarchy in the world around us. So love that book, so glad it's on here. We then have Saga Volume 2 by Brian K. Vaughan, which I did give 4 stars. I do remember that I gave Volume 1 3 stars, so I didn't love that as much. That was obviously the introduction to the series, and I think for me as a reader, Volume 2 just, you know, it expanded more, didn't it? It just gave me more to sink my teeth into and got me more into the series, and I have continued to persevere. Have I read maybe the first 6 or 7 volumes, I think? I'm feeling now that what I got up to were more 3 stars, so I think I've given those series as a whole a mixture of 4 and 3 stars, but in general I get bored of comic book series that go on forever and ever and ever. Maybe it's just I haven't found the right one, but most of my favourite comics have like limited story arcs, do you know what I mean? Like, I really enjoyed Lock and Key because it's only, is it 4 volumes? It's, you know, 6 or less if I remember correctly, and then it's done and you just get to read this whole story, and that works for me rather than it just going on and on and on and on and on. That's not really my cup of tea. I tend to tail off except apparently on Fritz Basket for whatever reason. Maybe that was just a different age, a different kind of reader. However, I did give Volume 2 4 stars. It is one of my favourites in the series. It's a series I still recommend to people, and is one that a lot of people seem to get different things from because I think it has a lot to offer. It's a sort of space opera series, Romeo and Juliet a little bit, about two different races of aliens and a man and a woman from either race who are at war with one another, falling in love and running away and being pursued by all of the different sort of intergalactic governments and agencies because they don't want people to know that their races can get on. We then have The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, book 3 in the Lord of the Rings series, and obviously the one with the highest rating. Again though, it's a later one, so people have pursued the series, because personally book 1 is my favourite of the Lord of the Rings series, but that's maybe because it just gets more intense and dangerous and war-strewn as they go on, which, as I've said, is not my cup of tea per se. However, I do like the Lord of the Rings series. It's again not a favourite fantasy series for me, but I get that it also did a lot for the genre. I love the Hobbits in particular, like the Hobbit storyline and their inclusion in the world is what makes it, I think. And I'm sure actually a lot of people would say the same. I don't think that's like a revolutionary thought. They're, you know, the sort of like underdog and the ordinary person that people can relate to in comparison to elves and orcs. But I do like the Lord of the Rings series. It has a lot of popularity for a reason. It's not my favourite fantasy series, and I know this is blasphemous, I kind of like the films better. I am way more likely to rewatch the films, as I've done in the past, than ever to reread the books. I've read them once and I feel like that was enough. However, specifically in terms of book 3, if you've seen the films and loved them and never read the book, there is the weirdest thing at the end of book 3 when they go back to the Shire. This whole like plot point that is not in the films and is kind of weird and hilarious, so you should totally read the books just to get to the end and read that little bit at the end of book 3. I can't obviously give away spoilers, but you're kind of missing out if you've not read that little bit. We then had Don't Call Us Dead by Denise Smith. This is an incredible poetry collection, and one again I'm glad has a high average rating, and I hope that high average rating encourages people to read it and pick it up. It has won some awards, so it has been recognised, it has received sort of official praise, if you will, and also winning prizes means that more people sort of see poetry collections and are more likely to pick them up, I always think. Although generally speaking, poetry collections definitely get less ratings on Goodreads than sort of any other genre as far as I can tell. Now, Denise Smith themselves explores a lot of really personal themes in this collection, being queer and being HIV positive, and wow, were some of those poems about HIV incredibly impactful. Like, I think those were some of the ones that really had me like tearing up the most when I was reading it, and when a poetry collection evokes such powerful physical emotions from me, I always rate it highly, because that's kind of the most incredible thing you can do with a collection of words, is it not? And they're just really emotive and like well constructed poems. They flow really well. The poetry collection also talks about racial violence, police shootings, loads of different topics with, like I said, such passion and emotion, and with all the right words, which, I mean, that's what you want from poetry, right? The right words to convey the right emotions, and that kind of applies to all books, doesn't it? We then had Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend, sequel to Nevermore. Again, I assume this is a higher average rating because the people that didn't like book 1 haven't continued on with the series, but it is also my favourite in the series so far. I know that's not true of everybody, but I loved Wondersmith. Like, I loved Nevermore, don't get me wrong, but Wondersmith just knocked it out of the park for me. I think I gave Nevermore 4 stars and Wondersmith 5. I loved this book. It is a middle grade fantasy series about Morrigan Crow, a 11-year-old girl that's fated to die on her 11th birthday, but instead is whisked away by this man called Jupiter North in order to compete for a place in the Wondrous Society. And while she's in Nevermore, it also means she's protected from this curse and those that might wish her harm. She's had a very strange upbringing, having known that she was always supposed to die and never really bonded with her family to the same degree because of it. And travelling to Nevermore kind of gives her an opportunity to make a whole new family and make friends for the first time, and then also discover more about herself and potential magical abilities she may have. And it's brilliant. I also think Wondersmith in particular really balanced the levity and the darkness in a perfect way, in the most perfect way like a middle grade book can do. Like, it did not shy away from some dark themes and genuine danger. Like, the stakes felt real in this book. And to make stakes in fiction feel real is again not always the easiest thing to do, especially I think when you're writing something for younger readers, because some people are going to steer away from making stakes feel too real because they might be worried about their audience, but actually I think children love that, and I think that's great for you as a child reader. So I loved that aspect, and I also thought it had all the charm and the joy that I would want from a middle grade as well. And then last but not least, we have Asata, an autobiography by Asata Shakur. Again, one I'm so pleased to see has a high average rating. And I know the average rating system is affected equally by how many people have read a book, but it's still a reflection, right, of the people that have read it and what they thought and might impact whether people pick a book up. So if this encourages anybody to pick up Asata, then excellent, because Asata is amazing. This book is 5 out of 5 stars for me, one of the best non-fiction books I've ever read. Definitely one of the best biographies I've ever read. Asata Shakur was a civil rights activist. She was one of the founders of the Black Liberation Army. She was a member of the Black Panther group. But she was wrongly incarcerated for a crime that she did not commit. If I remember correctly, she and another person she was travelling with were pulled over by state troopers basically because they were black at the time, and one of the state troopers died in a shootout, but she was not the one holding the gun. She didn't kill anyone, and like I said, was wrongly incarcerated and then was treated absolutely abysmally by the incarceration system. I mean, everybody is. It's not a great system, but like the things that happen to her in prison are horrendous. I mean, she ends up in like male prisons at some points. She's isolated for massive periods. She's just treated horrendously. However, she escaped prison. She wasn't acquitted. She escaped prison and is, I think, still one of America's most wanted terrorists because she's a escaped prisoner and she fled to South America, where again I think she still is and wrote this autobiography from. But she was basically a black woman and a political activist that the American state tried to make an example of unfairly. And her story is absolutely harrowing, but such an important one, and it gives you an important insight into the justice system in America, into institutionalized racism, into the civil rights movement. You also just generally hear a little bit about her life growing up and what it was like before all of this happened. But those are the 10 books I've read that have the highest average rating on Goodreads, excluding multiple books from series, as we established. I would love to hear what you think of these books. Do you think they are worthy of their best book status? Some of them I obviously loved, and I think I liked all of them in certain ways. I didn't hate any of them, so that is interesting, I have to say. But equally, while you're down there, let me know what the highest average rated books you've read are and whether you agree with that high average rating. Or if you don't use Goodreads, are there just popular books you've read that everyone else seems to love? And what did you think of them? Do you think they're worth the hype? Are they not worth the hype? If you didn't see it, I will of course link down below my reviews of the lowest rated books that I've read. And until next time, happy reading. I'll see you again soon. Bye guys!